Hi, seventh graders. It's Miss Bergelson here to introduce your next e-learning project. So in a couple of my classes, we started to talk about background, middle ground, foreground. We took our little field trip to the end of the hallway. But let's just look at those terms for a moment. So background in an image is the stuff that is obviously furthest away, hence the name background. And middle ground is the stuff that's between the background and the stuff closest to you, which is the foreground. So in this lovely image that you're seeing here, I am the foreground, right? And then there's not really very much middle ground, maybe the fan blade above my head, and then the background is like the wall behind me. If I go, woo, then my hands, I guess, would be the foreground, I would be the middle ground, and then the wall behind me would be the background. A lot of times when we think about foreground, background, middle grounds, and of course the lesson we were going to do in my class was a landscape, so I'm going to use it in terms of a very famous portrait and landscape painting, the Mona Lisa by Leonardo da Vinci. So one of the people always say, oh, why is it so famous? There's a lot of different theories. It was actually one of Da Vinci's favorite paintings. He never sold it, even though he had made it on commission. He never gave it away. And people say, oh, it's because her eyes follow you. Actually, any painting that's made where the artist tries to draw the sitter as if they're looking at them, that they're making eye contact, then the painting, the eyes would always follow you. So that's not the unique thing. I mean, it's cool, but it's not the only thing. She has this enigmatic smile that everyone always talks about. And then another thing is that it's one of the first paintings to use atmospheric perspective. So perspective, sometimes you think about like a vanishing point. It's literally since I was in high school, I don't think I've done anything that had a vanishing point, but you can still get the element of perspective where you have, different ways of creating things look like they're in the foreground, the middle ground, or the background, closer or further away. And in the Mona Lisa, it's one of the first examples of atmospheric perspective, meaning that the things that are in the background, right, so all these mountains and stuff, are lighter. They're kind of fuzzier and less intense because it's as if the atmosphere, like the air in between us, is making those things fainter. And if you can get out and look outside, you'll see that obviously when something's closer to you, like a flower and you're close up to you, or a bush, that stuff is really precise. You see all the detail, you see really intense lights and darks. And then as things get further away, the detail becomes less intense and the color kind of gets a little bit less intense as well. So in the Mona Lisa, you've got the background here, you've got the middle ground, which would be this road and these, closer mountains that are less blue. And then you've got the Mona Lisa, which is of course the foreground. So that foreground, middle ground, background creates a sense of depth. And we usually associate those terms with landscapes, right, which is an image of the outdoors. It could be a cityscape, it could be an ocean scene, it could be forest, wherever. And we tend to think about that horizon line, that line where the sky meets the earth. And again, if you were in the couple of classes that I got to this with, it's pretty rare that we would see, the sky coming all the way down to the ground because we don't live on the plains in the Midwest. So unless you're like at the beach and you see the sky going all the way down to the level water off of the horizon line, we generally don't see that. We see a row of trees, we see buildings, we see hills in the background, whatever. But another thing to keep in mind is that you can get that sense of depth and the whole idea of background, middle ground, foreground with images other than landscapes. It doesn't have to be a landscape. And the other thing, I wanted to create that sense of coming forward with this very fancy printout that I made. But I don't want you to mistake the fact that it says background, that's smaller overall, because if we look back at our dear Mona Lisa, she is obviously larger than like these trees in the background because they're further away, but the background takes up, and then into the middle ground, all of that space behind her, right? So there's no like sky and then blank space. This background is almost like a sheet falling behind her, and that's going to kind of inform what our project is going to be. So regardless of the subject matter of a painting. And I put some of them here, like portraits, which are pictures of people, self-portraits, which is where selfies come from. It's a picture of yourself. Interior, it's so weird because when I look at this, when I'm recording, it's all backwards to me. It's so strange. An interior scene, which is an indoor scene, a still life, which is like objects on a table, like, you know, flowers in a vase, or an abstraction. And there's different kinds of abstraction, but for this, I mean like a non-figurative abstraction where there's nothing representational. Some of the things that are going to create that sense of depth, that background, foreground, middle ground, are scale, which is the relative size of things, right? So the Mona Lisa is ginormous, not because she's a giant, but because she's much closer to us than the objects behind her, the middle ground and the background. There's also the placement. See, I had that there too. Placement, that's there. Because she's lower down in the page, she comes all the way to the bottom, right? And we don't see her legs and stuff. That's getting cut off. That's getting cropped. And the third thing that you want to think about is overlap. What is being blocked out by the thing that's in the front? Whatever's in the foreground is going to necessarily block out some of the middle ground and the background elements. So for this project, Miss Manoli and I made a Google Doc that has a whole bunch of images in it, famous artwork. It is by no means, by any stretch of the imagination, a comprehensive list of famous or important artwork. It's very much influenced by what we like and what we could find good resolution images of. We did make a slight effort to include some examples from around the world and some examples by people of color and women, but it's by no stretch of the imagination inclusive, and you do not have to rely completely on it. We also made a slideshow of the same images, just if that's easier for you to look at. We didn't put all the titles and the artist names and dates and stuff in the slideshow, just because we thought it might be nicer to just glance through that and see if anything caught your eye. If something in there does catch your eye, great. You can go to the Google Doc and you can look at that image. You don't necessarily need to print anything out. It's not necessary to waste your printer ink. And if you do choose to print something out, oh my goodness, please make sure that you're printing just the page that that image is on, because otherwise you're going to waste so much printer ink. It's crazy. Also, the images are not in the same order in the presentation as they are in the document, because I just wanted to make them look pretty in the presentation and let them flow. But you don't have to use an image from that presentation. You could think about an artist that you already know and like artwork by. You could, and look up a particular piece of art. You could think about something that you saw in a museum. You could think about something that you saw anywhere, that you saw online. You could think about, you could look through the presentation and be like, oh, I don't love that one, but I kind of like that style. And then you could do a Google search. You could also look at artwork around your own house and completely base this project on that. Ideally, we would like you to look at a work of art rather than, you know, just like Googling landscape or Googling, whatever, portrait. We want you to have we want you to do an interpretation of another artist's work, because that's the way artists work a lot of times, is that we're working in this continuum and responding to what came before us. So that is ideally what we would like you to do. Once you have chosen what your image is, there's a little assignment thing where you're gonna send us the name, the title, and artist, or if it's not that, you can send us a link or a picture of it. Then what you're gonna do is you're gonna break that image down into a foreground piece, a middle ground piece, and a background piece, but that's a lot to process. So all you have to do for this week by Friday is to work on the foreground piece. And it does not have to be overwhelming. I know everybody's like, it's a really stressful time and everybody's getting used to doing all their assignments and whatever. And the last thing that Miss Manoli and I want for you is for this to be stressful. If anything, it should be kind of like a little bit of a break, a different way of working. If you love art and this is like the thing you're looking forward to and you just want to go to town on this, by all means do. That's great. And if you have tons of materials at home and you want to use all those materials, fabulous. If you don't have tons of material, if you don't have tons of time, if you're not like, over the moon about this, that's okay. You can still do it and get it done and, invest yourself in it and do a good job and understand the project, but you don't have to, stress about, oh my God, it's not going to look perfectly realistic. Obviously, we're all working in kind of challenging times, so you do the best you can. So as a way to make you feel less stressed, I did a very quick little sketch of my foreground if I were doing the Mona Lisa, which, by the way, is the one image you can't do because I did it for my sample, so sorry. So here's the Mona Lisa again, okay? And you can work in whatever size you want. You can work on 8.5 by 11 paper if you have bigger paper, if you have smaller paper. I just did mine on I think it's a 4x6 index card. I wouldn't go smaller than that because I think that's going to be a little bit too tiny. But all I drew on my 4x6 index card was just the Mona Lisa. And actually, when I look at it there, it looks like she's looking too far to the side. But, obviously I'm going to fix it. I might add some color. Obviously, I'm going to fix up her hands. She's kind of has no shoulder on this side. I'll make adjustments. But I don't want you to feel compelled to make this photorealistic or perfect, or it's just, you want to capture mainly the scale, the relative size of whatever is in the foreground on this piece of paper. So see how big she is compared to the background rectangle? That's important. Eventually, don't even worry about this yet. You're going to color in, you're going to do other stuff. But eventually what's going to happen is you're going to take scissors and you're going to cut out the Mona Lisa, right? If that's not what you're doing, but you're going to cut out whatever is in your foreground. And there might be multiple pieces. You might have 2 or 3 separate things in your foreground with a lot of middle and background behind them. And then you're going to have another sheet, in this case, a 4x6 index card, which is going to be, let's say in this case, it would be just my hills. And then I'd have yet another one that would be just my furthest away hills and my sky. That's a lot to process, especially when I'm not there with you and when Miss Manola's not there with you. So all you have to think about, not a lot, is choosing an image that you want to base this project on. It can be from a presentation. It does not have to be, but it should be, if not a famous work of art, a work of art. So not just, like a photograph when you do like a Google search for easy landscape. If you want something a little more that you're seeing somebody's artistic vision. It doesn't have to be a landscape. It doesn't have to be realistic. It can be completely abstract. In the presentation, I put in a couple of images that are completely not objective, so nothing representational in them, or some that are a little bit abstracted, sort of based on other things. But I think in some ways those would be the harder choices, but if that feels more approachable to you, by all means, try that. We are always just an email away. We're going to have office hours Tuesday morning from 8 to 10, so you can email us then, and then I can invite you to a Google Meet if you want. But let us know if you have any questions, and we miss you, and we hope you enjoy this project. Bye.